Good day everyone. Before we start our discussion, let me introduce myself and my group mates. I am Olivia Dorado from BSIT 121 and my group mates Alexandra Trinidad, Adrian Digidnon, Angeline Ayepana, Marian Bell Dalisay, Aldrin Christian Mendoza, Angelo Capistrano, Christian Bantillo, Revi J. D. Almeron, Cyrus J. Lahato from BSIT 121. Our discussion titled are Scholastic Triumphs at Ateneo de Manila from 1872 to 1877. Poems written in Ateneo. Medical Studies in Ateneo. Unhappy Days at UST. Shattering the Myth about Rizal, the Pontifical UST. Scholastic Triumphs at Ateneo de Manila from 1872 to 1877. What is Ateneo de Manila? The Ateneo de Manila University, also known simply as the Ateneo de Manila, the Ateneo or Ateneo, is a private research, basic and higher education institution founded and run by the Society of Jesus in Quezon City, Philippines. Founded in 1859 as Escuela Municipal de Manila, it is the second oldest Jesuit-administered institution of higher learning in Asia Pacific. Ateneo Municipal, a college under the supervision of Spanish Jesuits. Escuela Pia, also known Charity School, formerly named of Ateneo, a school for poor boys in Manila, which was established by the city government in 1817. In 1859, name changed to Ateneo Municipal by the Jesuits and later become the Ateneo de Manila. How did Dr. Rizal get his name? Jose was the first of his family to adopt the surname Rizal. He registered under this name because their family name Mercado had come under the suspicion of the Spanish authorities. Rizal was first boarded in house outside Intramuros on Carabola Street. This was owned by a spinster named Titay, who owed the Rizal family the amount of 300 pesos. How did Jose Rizal enrolled in the Ateneo de Manila University? June 10, 1872, Rizal, accompanied by Pasiano, went to Manila to take the entrance examination on Christian doctrine, arithmetic, and reading at College of San Juan de Letran and passed them. His father was the first one who wished him to study at Letran but changed his mind and decided to send at Ateneo instead. Who is Father Magin Fernando and Manuel Ceres Burgos? Father Magin Fernando was the college registrar, refused to admit Rizal in Ateneo for two reasons. He was late for registration and he was sickly and undersized for his age, 11 years old. Sino nga ba si Manuel Ceres Burgos? Because of his intercession, nephew of Father Burgos, Rizal was reluctantly admitted at the Ateneo.
Good day everyone, I'm Alexandra Trinidad from BSIT 121. What happened to Rizal when he studied in Ateneo de Manila University? He entered Ateneo Municipal. As what usually happens, Rizal was discriminated by his classmates and professors, mainly because he had only a little knowledge about Spain, and also the fact that he was from Calamba, Laguna. He was also a late enrollee, so that added up to the situation.
Hindi naging madali kay Dr. Jose Rizal ang pagpasok sa Ateneo de Manila dahil siya ay isang late enrollee at ang kanyang mga kaklase ay dinidiscriminate siya dahil konti lang ang kanyang kaalaman about sa Spain.
Jesuit system of education. It trained the character of the students by rigid discipline and religious instructions. Students were divided into two groups. Roman Empire, consisting of internals, borders, red band. Carthaginian Empire, composed of the externals, non-borders, blue band. Emperor, the best student in each empire. Tribune, the second best. Decurion, the third best. Centurion, the fourth best. Standbearer, the fifth best. The Ateneo student in Rizal's time wore a uniform which consisted of hemp fabric trousers and striped cotton coat. The coat material was called rayadillo. First year in Ateneo, 1872 to 1873. Father Jose Beck, Rizal's first professor in Ateneo, whom he described as a tall thin man with a body slightly bent forward, a hammed walk, an ascetic face, severe and inspired, small deep sunken eyes, a sharp nose that was almost Greek, and the thin lips forming an arc whose ends fell toward the chin. A religious teacher, Rizal's first prize for being the brightest pupil in the whole class. To improve his Spanish, Rizal took private lessons in Santa Isabel College during the noon recesses. He paid 3 pesos for those extra Spanish lessons. At the end of the school year, in March 1873, Rizal returned to Calamba for summer vacation. When the summer vacation ended, Rizal returned to Manila for his second term in Ateneo. This time, he boarded inside Intramuros at number 6 Magallanes Street. His landlady was an old widow named Doña Petay. Second year in Ateneo, 1873 to 1874. At the end of the school year, Rizal received excellent grades in all subjects and a gold medal. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, the first favorite novel of Rizal which made a deep impression on him. It is one of the author's more important works, along with The Three Musketeers. Like many of his novels, it was expanded from plot outlines suggested by his collaborating ghostwriter, August Mackel. Universal History by Cesar Cano. Rizal persuaded his father to buy him this set of historical work that was a great aid in his studies.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aldrin Christian D. Mendoza from BSIT 191. Dr. Peter Jaeger, or Andres Peter Jaeger, born in November 30, 1860 to February 11, 1900, was a German zoologist, naturalist, and explorer who traveled throughout Asia in the second half of the 19th century, collecting for William museums. Dr. Peter Jaeger visited the Philippines in 1859 to 1860. Travel in the Philippines was published in Berlin in 1873. In this book, Dr. Jaeger foretold was the downfall of Spanish rule in the Philippines and the coming of Americans to the Philippines source. And Rizal had a letter of introduction by Blumentritt for him. Third year in Ateneo, 1874 to 1875. Rizal grades remained excellent in all subjects, but he won only one medal in Latin at the end of school year, March 1875. Rizal returned to the Calamba for the summer vacation. He himself was that impressed by his scholastic work. Fourth year in Ateneo, June 16, 1875. Rizal became an Eterno in the Ateneo. Father Francisco de Paula Sanchez, the Spanish Jesuit, was Rizal's favorite teacher in Ateneo, where he said Christ taught literature. It was under Father Sanchez that the young Rizal learned the Greek and Latin classics. He encouraged Rizal to cultivate his literary skills by writing essays and poetry. Mutual respect was always there between mentor and student. Father Sanchez even became a staunch defender of the knowledge. But in the letter to the Blumentritt dated May 1890, Rizal described the piece. Rizal described this Jesuit professor as model of uprightness and earnestness and love for the advancement of his pupils. Rizal topped all his classmates in all subjects and won 5 medals at the end of school term.
Good day everyone, my name is Angeline A. Iapana, course of BES IT 121. Last year in Ateneo 1876 to 1877, Rizal studies continued to fare well. As a matter of fact, he excelled in all subjects. The most brilliant Atenean of this time, he was truly the pride of Jesuits. March 23, 1877, commencement day Rizal, who was 16 years old, received from his alma mater, Ateneo Municipal, the degree of Bachelor of Arts with high honors. Marian Congregation, a religious society wherein Rizal was active member and later became the secretary. Rizal cultivated his literary talent under the guidance of Father Sanchez. Father Jose Villaclara faced the challenge of erecting a church during the year while serving a missionary in Dipolog. Jose Rizal has been his Ateneo professor in philosophy the year before, thus he was well acquainted with Jose Rizal. He asked here for assistant. Rizal studies painting under the famous Spanish painter Agustin Saez and sculpture under Romualdo de Jesus, noted Filipino sculptor. Rizal carved an image of the Virgin Mary on a piece of baticoling Philippine hardwood. Requested Rizal to carve an image of Sacred Heart of Jesus. The Jesuits fathers were amazed at the beauty and grace of the image. Father Leonard, impressed by Rizal, sculptural heart talented, requested him to carve him an image of Sacred Heart of Jesus. Felix M. Rojas, one of the Rizal's contemporaries in the Ateneo, related an incident of Rizal's school days in Ateneo which reveals hero's resignation to pain and forgiveness, neither bitterness nor rancor towards the guilty party.
I'm Adrian A. Diguignon, PSIT 121. Poems written in Ateneo. It was Doña Teodora who was first discovered the poetic genius of her son, and it was also she who first encouraged him to write poems. However, it was Father Sanchez who inspired Rizal to make full use of his God-given gift in poetry. Primera Inspiración, my first inspiration, 1874. The first poem Rizal probably wrote during his days in Ateneo, which was dedicated to his mother on her birthday. Rizal wrote it before he was 14 years old. In 1875, inspired by Eder Sanchez, Rizal wrote more poems as such Felicitación or Felicitazioni, El Embarque, Himno a la Flota de Magallanes, The Departure, Hymn to Magellan's Fleet, Y Español, El Cano, El Primero, and La Vuelta al Mundo. And he is Spanish, El Sano, the first to circumnavigate the world. The fourth one is Combate Orbistondo Terror de Jolo, The Battle Orbistondo Terror of Jolo. In 1876, Rizal wrote poems on various topics: religion, education, childhood, memories, and war. They were as follows. First is Un recuerdo a mi pueblo, in memory of my town. A tender poem in honor of Calamba, the hero's natal town. Second one is Alianza Íntima entre la Religión y la Buena Educación. Intimate alliance between religion and good education. Rizal showed the importance of religion in education. Third one is Por la educación recibe lustre la patria. Through education, the country receives light. Rizal believed in the significant role which education plays in the progress and welfare of a nation. Fourth one is El cautiverio y el triunfo, Batalla de Lucena y prisión de Boabdil. or in English, The Captivity and the Triumph, Battle of Lucena, and the imprisonment of Boabdil. This martial poem describes the defeat and capture of Boabdil, last Moorish Sultan of Granada. Fifth one is La Entrada Triunfal de los Reyes Catolices en Granada, or in English, The Triumphal Entry of the Catholic Monarchs into Granada. This poem relates the victorious entry of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel into Granada, last Moorish stronghold in Spain. A year later, in 1877, Rizal wrote more poems. It was his last years in Ateneo. Among the poems written that year were, first is El Heroismo de Colón, the heroism of Columbus. This poem praises Columbus, the discoverer of America. Second one is Colon y Juan II, Columbus and John II. This poem relates how King John II of Portugal missed fame and riches by his failure to finance the projected expedition of Columbus to the New World. Third one is Gran Consuelo en la Mayor Desdicha, great solace in great misfortune. This is a legend in verse of the tragic life of Columbus. Fourth one is Un diálogo aluviso a la despedida de los colegiales, a farewell dialogue of the students. This was the last poem written by Rizal in Ateneo. It is poignant poem and of farewell to his classmate. And that was the poem written by Rizal. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Angelo G. Capistrano from BSIT 121. El Niño Jesus, or To the Child Jesus. This poem was written in 1875 when Rizal was 14 years old. It was brief ode, A la Virgen Maria, or To the Virgin Mary, another religious poem which doesn't have exact date when it was written. San Eustacio, Martyr, or Saint Eustace the Martyr, a drama based on the prose story of Saint Eustace, which he wrote in poetic verses during summer vacation of 1876 and finished it on June 2, 1876. Medical studies at University of Santo Tomas on 1877 to 1882. After finishing the first year of course in philosophy and letters, on 1875 to 1878, Rizal transferred to medical course. Don't send him to Manila again. He knows enough. If he gets to know more, the Spaniards will cut off his head. Doña Teodora vigorously opposed the idea that Rizal pursue higher learning in university. On April 1877, Rizal, who was then nearly 16 years old, matriculated in University of Santo Tomas taking the course of philosophy and letters. Because first, his father liked it. Second, he was still uncertain as to what career to pursue. Father Pablo Ramon, rector of Ateneo, who had been good to him during his student days in that college, asking for advice on choice of career, but unfortunately, he was in Mindanao. During Rizal first school term in University of Santo Tomas on 1877 to 1878, Rizal was studied in Ateneo. He took the vocational leading to title of Perito Agrimensor or Expert Surveyor. Rizal excelled in all subjects in surveying course in Ateneo, obtaining gold medals in agriculture and topography. On November 25, 1881, the title was issued to Rizal for passing the final examination in the surveying course. Liceo Artistico Literario or Artistic Literary Lyceum of Manila, Associate of Literary Men and Artists, held a literary contest in year 1879. A la Juventud Filipina, or to the youth Filipino, Rizal, who was then 18 old, submitted this poem. Is an inspiring poem of flawless Rizal, beseech the Filipino youth to rise from lethargy, to let genius fly swifter than the wind, and descend with art and science to break the change that have long bound the spirit of people. This winning poem Rizal is classic in Philippine literature for two reasons. First, it was a great poem in Spanish written by a Filipino whose merit was recognized by Spanish literary authorities. Second, it was expressed for the first time the nationalistic concept that Filipinos and not the foreign were the fair hope of fatherland. The board of judge, composed of Spaniards, was impressed by Rizal poem and gave it the first prize, which consisted of silver pen feather shaped and decorated with a gold ribbon. El Consejo de los Dioses, or the Council of Gods, an allegoric drama written by Rizal, which entered in literary contest of Artistic Literary Lyceum in 1880 to commemorate the fourth centennial of the death of Cervantes, was literally masterpiece based on the Greek classic. The prize was awarded to Rizal, a gold ring on which was engraved bust of Cervantes. D.N. del Pozo, a Spanish writer who won second prize. Juanito al Pasig, or Beside the Pasig, a zarzuela which was staged by Ateneans on December 8, 1880, the occasion of annual celebration of feast day of the Immaculate Conception of Patrones of Ateneo. Rizal wrote it as president of Academy of Spanish Literature in Ateneo. A Filipina nas a sonnet written by Rizal for album Society of Sculptors. In this sonnet, he urged all Filipino artists to glorify the Philippines. ABDL Aziz Y. Mohama Rizal composed a poem in 1879, which was declaimed by Ateneans Manuel Fernandez on the night of December 18, 1879, in honor of the Ateneo's patrones. ALMRP Pablo Ramon Rizal composed a poem in 1881 as an expression of affection to Father Pablo Ramon, the Ateneo rector who had been so kind helpful to him. Vicenta Y. Bardaloza, a pretty girl, colegiala who skillfully played harp at the Regalado home, whom Rizal was infatuated in Pakil. Rizal mentioned Turumba, or wherein the people dancing in street during the procession in honor Miraculous Virgen Maria de los Dolores. In chapter 4 of No Limitang Here, Pagsanhan Falls in his travel diary, United States, Saturday, May 12, 1888, where he said that Niagara Falls was the greatest cascades I ever saw, but not so beautiful nor fine as fall at Los Baños, Pagsanhan. Compañerismo or comradeship, Rizal founded a secret society of Filipino students in University of Santo Tomas in 1880. Companions of Jehu, member of the society, was after valiant Hebrew General Galicano Absibal Rizal Kasim from Batangas, who is Secretary of the Society.
I'm Christian J. Pantilla from BSIT 121. Unhappy Days at the UST. Rizal found the atmosphere at the University of Santo Tomas suffocating to his sensitive spirit. He was unhappy at this Dominican institution of higher learning because the Dominican professors were hostile to him. The Filipino students were racially discriminated against by the Spaniards. The method of instruction was obsolete and repressive in Rizal's novel El Filibusterismo. He described how the Filipino students were humiliated and insulted by their Dominican professor, and how backward the method of instruction was, especially in the teaching of the natural science. He related in chapter 13 in the class in physics. Shattering the myth about Rizal and Pontifical UST. This can be very exhaustive as deal with historical facts apropos of the relationship of Jose Rizal with the University of Santo Tomas. I am indebted to Father Fidel Villaruel of the Intimate Historian and former archivist of UST Archives for giving me the distinct and immense privilege without going through the norms and policies of touring the archives and letting me examine some important documents pertaining about not principally of the history of the Philippines. As a pioneering institution of learning from the metronym of Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora, to the propaganda movement, to the revolution of 1896, to the birth of the Republic in 1898, to the Commonwealth period, and finally to the restoration of independence in 1946. It is therefore presumptuous to assume the UST had a hand in the making of the history of the Philippines. Sadly, in spite of some efforts of few academicians and historians to present a more truthful history of the UST during the Spanish era, so many still were caught off guard and instead decided to rely on meager source materials. Worse, some merely copied with pre-war and post-war authors written in the past 100 years. New generation writers, historians, and biographers of Jose Rizal are no exception to such historians like Anna, Craig, Russell, Loudback, Kutz, Hernandez, and Zaid, who had pictures a villain character of. The second confusion was their failure to understand the underlying principles behind the anti-price and anti-UST writings of Rizal's, particularly the El Feli. After seeing documents at the UST archives and reading Father Villaruel's writing study on Rizal in the University of Santo Tomas, can only scoff at the bus at their ignorance and use many of the myths to advance their cause. Such is the case of some pictures who undoubtedly use these myths for their own good. In the words of Dr. Shattering, former chairman of the National Historical Institute, it is a great virtue of his Father Villaruel's study that he sweeps away many of the myths which have passed for fact. For almost 3/4 of the century, he has solved many difficult questions, and readers can be grateful for a valuable and devoted piece of work. This threatened to rectify some issues pertaining to the negative pictures projected about Rizal's relationship with his alma mater. The University of Santo Tomas, based on the study by Father Villaruel, who had diligently dug through the archival materials of UST and Archivo de la Provincia de Santa Rosario, was Rizal discriminated and treated shabbily by the Dominicians. Why did he leave UST? Why, why did he criticize the university years later? How are the stories of El Filibusterismo to be understood?
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Cyrus J. Lahato from BSIT 121. Here are some excerpts from Father Fidel Villaruel's study, Myth. Rizal complained about his grade in UST and was discriminated and treated shabbily by the Dominicans. Facts. Rizal entered the UST in 1877, enrolling in the free law course, which was made up of philosophical subjects. The course was commonly called metaphysics. He passed the course brilliantly, with the highest grades in spite of his initial indifference to philosophy and his youthful distraction through the year. Then he opted for the career of medicine in 1878 to 1879 he took simultaneously the pre-medical course and the first year of medicine. This was against the rules, but Rizal was favored with a dispensation. The pre-medicine course was also called affiliation because the student, having taken already physics, chemistry, and natural history in the high school, now took an advanced course on the same subjects. Rizal did not take in Santo Tomas the class of physics described in El Fili, but rather in Ateneo. In his courses of medicine, Rizal was a good student, above average though not excellent, but none of his classmates were excellent either. Summing up, in the 21 subjects taken in UST, Rizal obtained 1 aprobado or passing grade, 8 bueno or good, 6 notable or very good, and 6 sobresaliente, excellent. Majority of students in Rizal's time or in any time would have been satisfied with the above grades. It is possible that Rizal was not, but it is a fact that he never complained about his grades. There is not a single word in his works showing displeasure at the unfairness of UST. Yet, many of his biographers are angry, unreasonably angry, including anti-UST fexers, at the treatment given to the national hero by his alma mater. How could Rizal, after a perfect record of excellence in the high school Ateneo, now receive such low grades at UST? The critics had to look for an explanation, and since they did not find fault in Rizal, then they had to blame the Dominican and UST. And from Retana and to Austin Craig, from Frank Lubac to Austin Coates, and to quite a long line of Filipino biographers. With some exception, you only hear the same repeated lamentation that every school child must know, learn in the textbooks, that Rizal was below his usual standards, and for the extremely serious charge that the Dominican professor were hostile to him, and the Filipino students were racially discriminated side, and that there was excessive harping on the alleged intellectual superiority of the Spanish because he was white to the Filipino, a brown man, and injured J.M. Hernandez, and so on. And an objective historian must squarely face and honestly answer these grave statements which sound like accusation. Was Rizal far below his usual standards? What standards in the first place? If by usual standards we mean the grades of his Ateneo high school studies, the comparison is unfair. Nobody places elementary or high school standards against college or university standards. They belong to different levels. At the Ateneo Municipal, Rizal was excellent, though not the only excellent student at the UST. None of his classmates ever got near to keeping a straight record of excellence. And this was because medicine was a different kind of stuff altogether. Therefore, if we are to arrive at a just appreciation of Rizal's performance at the UST, we should compare not his grades in the high school with those in the university, but Rizal's grade in medicine against those of his classmates. In the first year of medicine, Rizal's class was made up of 24 students, but due to academic failures, 17 of them were left by the roadside before they reached the 4th year, when only 7 took the final examination. And in this sport, and for Rizal last year, he landed in second place behind Cornelio Mapa, and persecuted Rizal would have probably ended by the same roadside as the 17 debarred classmates, or would have never boasted of being when he left for Spain in 1882.
Hi, my name is Marinville Pelagodalisay from BSIT 121. It can hardly be said that Rizal was discriminated and treated shabbily by the Dominion, since he was granted the rare privilege of studying simultaneously in the preparatory course of medicine and the first year of medicine. Records likewise show the 6 Spaniards were enrolled with Rizal in the first year of medicine, of whom 3 were Peninsular and 3 Filipino born. If the criticism of some biographers were true, these 6 students would have been favored by the prize. Yet, at the end of the 4th year, there remained only 1 Filipino-born Spaniard, Jose Resocion Y. Padilla, who managed to get only a poor passing grade, last among successful students, and who, in the following year, received a crushing suspenso. It would be unkind to reduce our failure whether of Spanish or of Filipinos, but the biographers of Rizal will not be convincing unless they prove with valid documents an existence of racial discrimination in UST in the 19th century when it came to the academic grades. Rizal's inclination and abilities must be taken into account, while he was adaptedly inclined to, and remarkably fitted for, the arts and letters. He was not much attracted to medicine. Perhaps, say Leon Maria Guerrero, medicine was not his real vocation. Medicine was a convenient career taken up in the consideration of the poor health of Rizal's mother, whom he wanted to help and eventually help as a physician. When Rizal transferred to Spain and continued his study at the University of Madrid, he showed their similar characteristics. He was sobresaliente in the humanistic studies, literature, languages, and history, while in the medicine he steered worse than the University of Santo Tomas. Yet no historian or biographer has ever complained about his poor performance in Madrid or hinted that Rizal was discriminated against in the Central University. Rizal had Dominican friends in the person of Father Everesto Arias and Father Joaquin Fonseca. It was while studying at UST that Rizal obtained public recognition as a poet. It was the Dominican Father Arias who helped him cultivate his craft and poetry. During his Tomasian years, Rizal composed the best poems of his pre-European period, one of them being a La Juventud Filipina, winner of the first prize in the contest organized by the Liceo Artistico Literario in 1879.
I am Rev. J. D. Almeron from BSIT 121. Myth. Rizal is said to have left UST for the following reasons. A. Because of a certain professor of UST caused him displeasure. B. Because of the atmosphere in UST, meaning the mystic atmosphere suffocated him, and it is presumed that because of it he left. C. Because in his class of medicine, the lay professor made a statement contrary to the textbook, and then he refused to permit discussion or to give explanations. So Rizal decided he was wasting his time to remain in the university. D. Because he found unfriendliness in the university. E. Because UST could not give fuller learning to the youth, and its usefulness was almost, if not altogether, nil. Fact: 20 authors quoting from the same erroneous source commit the same error 20 times over. Therefore, what the quoted authors have said must be submitted to scrutiny. More significantly, all the authors quoted above have one thing in common: None of them quote any historical source, like words from Rizal's correspondence, his articles, etc. If any source is ever mentioned, it is infallibly the novel El Fili. But is there not, we ask, a better source to support historical facts than a novel? It has been stated that a certain professor, more concretely a lay professor of medicine, disagreed with the textbook and refused to entertain discussions on the topics of his subject. This professor is identified by Craig as one who, some years later, was classmate of Rizal at the University of Madrid. He was Dr. Jose Franco, who is professor of Rizal in Santo Tomas, had threatened to fall the whole medical class, but granting the Professor Franco was speaking seriously, it is quite improbable that Rizal decided to leave the Philippines for an incident with one professor, who besides did not fall him in the final examinations. Rizal companions and friends did not seem to have noticed any misunderstanding between Rizal and any professor. As shown in a letter of Jose M. Cecilio, your departure without notice has caused surprise among many friends, to the point of stirring their curiosity. They asked whether there were serious matters going on which prompted you to leave.
2. To attribute Rizal's departure to what one author calls rampant bigotry, discrimination, and persecution existing in USD, whether said in general or whether specifically referring to Rizal, is a gratuitous accusation expressed in ready-made phrases loaded with feeling, presume that an educational policy like the one implied in such word has never existed in any school or university, anywhere or any period. As for Rizal, we have already explained with academic records on hand that there was in fact a discrimination in his favor when he was allowed to take simultaneously the preparatory course of medicine and the first course of medicine. And finally, he was of the 7 out of 26 who reached the beginning of the 5th year course, which he started in Madrid. All this has been shown here without retort, without feeling, and only with the aid of laconic diplomatic record as basis. Meet the class of Physics, Chapter 13, in El Filibusterismo, is autobiographical of Rizal's stay in UST, and that Rizal anti-Fry and anti-UST writings are reflective of how the national hero loathed the university. Fact number 1. While in Europe from 1882 to 1892, Rizal changed considerably in at least one aspect in his attitude towards religion. He gave up some basic and essential tenets of his faith and ceased to be a practicing Catholic. This was due mainly to his continuous association with many rationalist thinkers and liberal politicians of Spain and other countries of Europe. A new rationalistic approach to life and his affiliation to Freemasonry accentuated his anti-clerical sentiments and his antipathy for the Catholic Church, for her belief and external manifestation, dogmas, rites, and rituals and devotional life. These changes in Rizal must be taken into account when assessing his ironic criticism of the Church, the religious orders, and the University of Santo Tomas. History showed that the attacks thrown by propagandists at Santo Tomas, particularly the Church, were just part and parcel of the clash between liberalism and Thomism, and that the attack at Rome at Santo Tomas, which was under the royal patronage of Spain, was not unique since every university in Europe, like Oxford, received the same fate for upholding Thomism. The Vatican, in an encyclical, endorsed Thomism as an instrument to counteract rationalism, which at the time began to penetrate all spheres of society.
Crucially affecting this new attitude of criticism were the events that occurred in Calamba from 1887 onwards as a result of the famous agrarian litigation between his family and the Dominican hacienda. Whatever reasons for secession might have existed in previous years due to the worsening economic condition affecting the country at large, Rizal's personal invention in the affair in 1887 precipitated at the legal suit.
The case ended in the court with an adverse sentence against the family and the other tenants and the tragic deportation of some Rizal's immediate relatives. The social question and lawsuit had nothing to do with the U.S., but it surely soared Rizal's pen when writing about an educational institution that was run by the owners of Calamba Hacienda. We have here another factor of his critical attitude. Again, he had not in mind any past academic experience. The novel El Fili was written precisely during the years of Calamba agrarian crisis. Any student of literature or a practicing writer would agree that if there are things that affect the consciousness of a writer, it would be a moment, the milieu, the and the race.
The class of physics is the subject of chapter 13 of the film, a subject that some historians and biographers have used and abused lavishly. They have a reason because the story comes in very handily to illustrate the student years of Rizal at the UST, regardless of the novelistic character of the source. The practical question here is whether the story of the class of physics really happened on even one day, whether it reflects educational methods practiced in the UST in the 19th century, or whether Rizal was just creating a scene suitable to the aims of the novel, that is, to attack and discredit the religious institutes. Some biographers easily believe Retana's remark that this chapter is an accurate picture of what happened in the Pontifical University of Manila when Rizal studied there. A remark written, of course, when Retana had turned into a bitter enemy of the religious orders. But even taking for granted that Rizal based his story on some incident that happened during his university years, this is no reason to conclude that the general life of the university was similar. As for the bleak picture of the physical classroom itself, the UST still possessed the schedule of classes in those years, and the class of physics is invariably assigned to the physics laboratories, not to unordinary classrooms. Finally, Austin Coates' statement that this chapter of the Philly is clearly autobiographical is totally unacceptable. If by autobiographical he meant that the experience of Placido was actually felt by Rizal personally or by some of his classmates. And the reason is very simple. Rizal did not take the physics at the UST. He had taken that course at the Ateneo. Municipal in 1876 to 1877, Rafael Palma, who took up physics and chemistry in 1890 at the Ateneo Municipal, a little over 10 years after Rizal, recalled later that the laboratory materials in use at the Ateneo for teaching natural history and physics were very poor. The whole chapter is a caricature, very useful for the aims of the novel. It is not Rizal's biography. Ayon kay Austin, ang kabanata ng Philly ay isang autobiographical o sariling talambuhay na hindi katanggap-tanggap. Si Rizal ay hindi nag-aral ng physics sa UST kundi sa Ateneo. Ang buong kabanata ay isang karikatura at kapaki-pakinabang para sa mga layunin ng nobela, hindi ito talambuhay ni Rizal.